It's a hike in the forest. It's a rail trail. Sometimes it's a highway or a ferry. It's a water park in the city. It's a family outing or a solo journey in the outback. Always the Transcanada Trail is an adventure. Launched in 1992, the Transcanada Trail is the world's longest multi-use recreational route, more than 22,000 kilometers. It spans every province and territory, reaching the Arctic, Pacific, and Atlantic coasts. When the nation celebrates 150 years of Canadian Confederation in 2017, the Transcanada Trail will be connected. But connected is by no means completed. The trail will always be a work in progress as volunteer trail builders across the country continue to improve it. In British Columbia, those volunteers are mainly members of Trails BC. They have created 2 routes totaling 2,900 kilometers. In the north, the Transcanada Trail begins just outside of BC in Watson Lake, Yukon. For nearly 1,000 kilometers, it follows the Alaska Highway over the northern Rockies and down into Dawson Creek. It continues on back roads, crossing onto the Alberta Prairie. The longer route in the south runs about 1,800 kilometers from Vancouver Island to the Rocky Mountains. With hundreds of access points, all of it can be traveled by foot or bicycle, much of it by horse or wheelchair. On Vancouver Island, the Transcanada Trail reaches its westernmost point as it travels more than 200 kilometers from Victoria to Nanaimo. It starts at the same place as the Transcanada Highway, then follows the seashore through British Columbia's capital city. This is North America's largest Pacific island, 3 times the size of Cape Breton Island off Canada's Atlantic coast. With a population approaching 800,000, cities and wilderness live side by side on Vancouver Island. Much of the journey from Victoria to Nanaimo takes rail trails and back roads through small towns and working forests. At Nanaimo, the Transcanada Trail leaves Vancouver Island on a BC ferry headed for the British Columbia mainland. The cruise across the Strait of Georgia is a great chance to see marine life. The 400-kilometer Transcanada Trail route through the Lower Mainland took some creative thinking by Trails BC, the organization responsible for the Transcanada Trail in British Columbia. From Lonsdale Quay in North Vancouver, it takes the sea bus across Burrard Inlet into the heart of a city that's home to half of all British Columbians. Where one might expect chaos, Trails BC has laid out a well-chosen, worry-free route right through downtown Vancouver. It takes paved paths around Stanley Park and False Creek. Beyond Science World, it follows designated bikeways out of town, then carries on through the farmlands of the Fraser Valley on country roads and river dikes. It hugs the Fraser River, then veers inland through the historic village of Clayburn. Farther along, great blue herons nest near the trail by the Vedder River. The journey through the Chilliwack Valley and over the Cascade Mountains is one of the most challenging on the Transcanada Trail in BC. On the outskirts of Hope, the start of the Kettle Valley Rail Trail comes as a welcome relief. On the eastern side of Hope, the Transcanada Trail is a near-continuous railway corridor for more than 600 kilometers to Castlegar. Brookmire is the Transcanada Trail's gateway to the Okanagan. From here, the famous Kettle Valley Railway climbs for 270 kilometers to its highest point at Kootenay Lake. This region's railway history comes to life on a short stretch of track near Summerland. Some of the railway heritage is protected in Myra Canyon, a National Historic Site that could well be the Canadian highlight of the Transcanada Trail. On the leeward side of the coastal mountains, the Okanagan is protected from Pacific rains. It is dry and hot, with warm swimming holes to rinse off the trail dust when summer heat reaches the mid-30s. Growing fruit is a major industry in this region. The Okanagan is also one of British Columbia's busiest vacation spots, and the Transcanada Trail is one of the biggest attractions. The Transcanada Trail continues on abandoned railway corridor for another 240 kilometers as it moves away from McCulloch Lake in the Okanagan toward Farron in Boundary Country. Midway is officially mile zero for the Kettle Valley Rail Trail to the west. It is also the start of the Columbia and Western Rail Trail heading east. Near the trail at Greenwood is an odd reminder of Boundary Country's mining history. A local park has a collection of Hell's Bells, a huge mound of slag dumped by 25-ton bell-shaped rail cars. Grand Forks is the heart of British Columbia's Doukhobor country. A religious sect of Russian pacifists, their communal lifestyle began to crumble in the early 1900s when their leader and 8 other passengers were killed by a time bomb on a night train bound for Grand Forks. There's a reminder of the unsolved murders beside the trail at Farron. A spectacular trestle crosses the Kettle River before the trail climbs above Kootenay Lake up to its highest point at Farron. From Farron in the Monashee Mountains to Elk Pass on the Great Divide, the Transcanada Trail runs through the Kootenay Rockies region for 630 kilometers. It encounters a range of industries as it moves through the Columbia River watershed toward the Rockies. From the trail above Nelson, there are great views of Kootenay Lake and the heritage buildings that have been restored throughout the city. The trail takes a ferry across Kootenay Lake, then runs through Kimberley and Cranbrook as it approaches North America's most famous mountain range. At Sparwood, the biggest dump truck in the world appears minuscule in its Rocky Mountain surroundings. Thrust up from the earth by powerful tectonic forces and sculpted by ancient glaciers, the Rockies are a truly grand finale to a journey across British Columbia on the Transcanada Trail. In northern British Columbia, the Transcanada Trail begins just outside of BC in Watson Lake, Yukon. For nearly 1,000 kilometers, it takes the Alaska Highway over the Northern Rockies and down into Dawson Creek. It continues on back roads across the BC-Alberta border. Cars and motorhomes are the primary travel mode, but all of the Transcanada Trail in northern BC can be cycled or hiked. Self-sufficiency is the key to a successful journey. This is BC's northern outback, with long distances between small towns and frequent encounters with wildlife. The trail moves through Canada's boreal forest into the northern Rocky Mountains, which are every bit as captivating as the southern Rockies, but with far fewer tourists. Trail travelers warm up in Laird River Hot Springs Park, which has its own microclimate and unique plants and animals. From Summit Lake, the Transcanada Trail comes down the eastern slopes of the Rockies into the only region of BC that is part of the Canadian prairies. As in southern British Columbia, the BC-Alberta boundary in the north is the gateway to an entirely different region, a new adventure on the Transcanada Trail. For guidebooks, maps, trail information, and updates, contact the Transcanada Trail or Trails BC.